Well, hello and welcome to Everything You've Learned About Dating and Relationships is Wrong. I'm Jonathan Asley, and I'm so excited to be sharing episode 5, Proximity Creates Continuity. Now, before I start, I just want to read something to you to get started, so I have to put on my glasses, but we're going to talk about the seduction and illusion long-distance relationships create and why they really don't make sense in the long run if you're seeking real partnership. In addition, how there's a false sense of intimacy when you're talking on the phone a lot. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about. So the title, Proximity Creates Continuity. Let's first think about the word continuity. Continuity in the form of a relationship is something continuous, something that's developing roots. Okay, I want you to really think of it about developing roots. And the more you water and nurture a relationship, the deeper the roots become. They become continuous. They keep going down and down and down. Now, why is this so important to recognize this? Well, roots is what sustains a relationship when you hit eventual storms. I literally want you to think about a tree in a hurricane wind. If that tree had no roots, what's going to happen? It's going to blow away. It's the same with the relationship that doesn't develop roots. So why does proximity create roots? Well, let's think about it. When the closer two people live together, the easier it is to spend time together. The easier it is to create experiences. And not just experiences like getaway weekend kind of experiences, but those day-to-day experiences. And what I call the meat of a relationship. It's going out with family and friends. It's spending time doing social activities and hobbies and mutual interest. And the farther two people live from each other, the much harder it is to do that. And yet long distance relationships are incredibly seductive because they have this built-in element of what's nice about the distance is that you get your own freedom and space when you make time for someone. You make what I call bubble effect time, this bubble effect of getting together, spending a lot of intimate time together, a lot of great sex, and then going back to your respective worlds. And it's like going on vacation, depending on how far you live from each other, the farther it is, the more it feels like a vacation, which is incredibly seductive. But here's the challenge with long distance relationship, and for my female clients, you really need to hear this because there's a false sense of intimacy that is created when you spend time on the phone. Let me repeat that. There's a false sense of intimacy. And here's why. And you can Google the following: 70% of communication is nonverbal. So when you're talking on the phone, when you're instant messaging, when you're text messaging, you're only getting 30% of the entire communication that is being delivered. Even when you do FaceTime, it's still a smaller percentage because you're not getting the energetic feel of someone, you're not getting their body language, their tone, and it can be very seductive. And when I say false sense of intimacy, false sense of connection, false sense of commitment. And in the short run, when men are chasing sex, and if you go back to episode 2 where I talk about the chase and how men aren't chasing fully committed relationships leading to partnership, what are they chasing? They're chasing sex. And so it's very easy for us men in the early stages to put a lot of effort in, even if it's telephone call and whatnot, because we're building up that false sense of intimacy that leads us to the bedroom. But as the relationship grows, we get tired of talking on the phone. You know this. You've seen this hundreds of times. Men start to fade off after the 3 months in long distance relationship because talking on the phone is arduous. It requires emotional responsibility. It requires a lot of emotional effort. And so in the early stages, it's this illusion, it's this bubble, and it begins to fade. And this is why long distance relationships are very challenging. And frankly, depending on where you live, long distance relationship could be easily 10 miles here in Los Angeles. I mean, someone who lives 10 or 12 miles from me could be a 1-hour drive just to get together. And it's difficult to do those casual things at the spare, in a spontaneity, spur of the moment is what I was looking for. Okay. So And I get it. Some of you really like this idea of long distance relationship because it is a bubble. It's great. But you have to ask yourself, are you really seeking partnership? Are you really seeing are you seeking, a day-to-day meet relationship where you're doing those things, like I said, social activities, hobbies, and mutual interests. And that's how men fall in love, is through experiences. In addition, spending time with family and friends is hugely important. Those experiences. And it's also being there when your partner needs, like, hey, I need a ride to the airport at 6 a.m. Can you take me to the airport? That's also showing teamwork. That's what builds partnership. So the closer, and think about it, up until literally before internet dating, it was very rare to have a long distance relationship. And sure, people met on cruise ships, fell in love, and they created a relationship together. But those were people that didn't have children and didn't go through a divorce and didn't have, financial issues going on in their life. It was by the way, if you don't have children, if you're totally set with money, then yes, a long distance relationship is a little bit easier. But if you have responsibilities, maybe you own a concrete brick and mortar business that requires you to be there a lot. Sure, it's great to take a vacation every now and again, but are you really building the roots, those roots to long-term commitment? And that's what I just want to have you challenge and open your eyes to. And beware of this illusion that's created through long distance. The closer to, and again, I was saying, before internet, it was rare that there was long distance relationship. Now, oftentimes you think, oh my God, the city I live in sucks. Los Angeles has nobody for me. A population of 10 million. I've got to go to Dallas, or I've got to go to New York, I've got to go to Phoenix to meet that special person because there's nobody in my city. That's a fucking crock of shit. You got a gazillion people in your city. Now, meeting them is another story, and there's no doubt that's a challenge. But it's so the minute you connect, for some of you, if you've connected with someone who lives a couple hundred miles away, thousands of miles away, it might seem seductive. But really, do you have the chance to build roots? And most of the time, women pretzel themselves to accommodate the man. They tend to be the one that travel more. They tend to be the ones that might abandon their life in that hopes of love. It's that fantasy, that projection of love. A really fully committed relationship that leads to partnership where there's day-to-day activities requires a two-way street. In fact, if you saw my Facebook today, if it isn't a two-way street, it's a dead end. And that's where most long-distance relationships end up in a dead end. And yet, that's not the reason why you break up. You break up for a lot of other reasons. But you're not recognizing, many of you are not recognizing that it was the distance that created the problem, not the problem itself. Because here's the thing about long distance, you don't get to see a person's childhood wounds. You don't get to see their behavior. You get to see them, their ambassador of their best selves. I'm going to steal something from Chris Rock. The ambassador of their best self. That's what you get in long distance. And then after a while, and by the way, for those of you who've experienced it, please make a comment. You know what I'm talking about. Please comment about this because you know it to be true. And yet many of you are hopeful romantics. Well, you just never know, Jonathan. There's always that last bit of hope. I get it. But are you looking for the exception, or you want to go by the rule? Proximity creates continuity, those roots in a relationship. All right, you get my point. All right, you're more than welcome to comment about this. I'd love to create a conversation. Post some comments below. Let's get a dialogue going, because I know there's going to be those who argue with me, but I'm going to tell you something. Long distance relationships are a fucking bitch. And better to find someone who lives in your backyard to build a life together than fantasize about a life with someone. And remember, I said this before, 70% of communication is nonverbal. So it's better that you spend a lot of time together to get to know one another versus this fantasy realm. Well, as always, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. My name is Jonathan Aslay. I'm going to send you a big, gigantic Jonathan Bear hug and wish you a super duper wonderful day. Thanks so much. Bye now.